Good day to each and everyone. Today, the Group F will be discussing about media and globalization. So, Group F members includes Clapano Julian Cherry, Bacolod Bea Faith, Donaire Gladys, Pitogo Carla, and truly yours, Ugana Vienikami. So, before we proceed to our first topic, let me present to you our objectives. So first is analyze how various media drive different forms of global integrations, and the second one is compare the social impacts of different media on the processes of globalization, and the third one is explain the dynamic between local and global cultural productions and define responsible media consumption. So before we start, let me discuss a brief introduction to our topic for today. So it's all about media and globalization. So globalization entails the spread of various cultures. What do you mean by this? So when a film is made in Hollywood, it is shown not only in the United States, but also in the other cities across the globe. Yeah, so it is true. It doesn't mean that the film is made in that particular country. It doesn't mean that it will show in that country only. So it will also shown in different countries. For example, Hollywood. So it is not only shown in the United States, also across the globe. Could be in the Philippines, Cambodia, or other parts of the world. Another example is, I know you are familiar with Psy, a Korean rapper. So South Korean rapper Psy song is, one of his famous song is Gangnam Style. So Gangnam Style may have been about a wealthy suburb in Seoul, Korea, but its listeners included millions who have never been or may never go to Gangnam. So see, so even though Psy is a Korean rapper and is all about Gangnam, so there's a lot of people across the globe still wants to listen of this kind of song, even though they are not Korean. So that's it. So even though they are not Korean, some of them fun to listen about Korean songs. So, and even some of them may not even know what Gangnam is. So that's it. Globalization also involves the spread of ideas. So for example, the notion of the rights of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or which we call also LGBT communities, is spreading across the world and becoming more widely accepted. Similarly, the conservative Christian church that opposes these rights moves from places like South America to Korea and to Burundi in Africa. So people who travel the globe teaching and preaching their beliefs in the university, churches, public forums, classrooms, so on and so forth. So before, people used to travel just to preach or teach their beliefs in other universities, churches, public forums, classroom, or even as guests of a family play a major role in the spread of culture and ideas. So that is before, no? Nag-travel pa jud sila just to preach. But now, in the 21st century, we have these high technologies. We have television programs, social media groups, books, movies, magazine, or other references that don't need a face-to-face interaction. So it is very important nowadays. So especially now, we are facing, we are in the midst of the pandemic, so we're not allowed to have a face-to-face interaction. So we have the social media to still have communication to our loved ones from afar. So in this scenario, globalization relies on media as its main conduit for the spread of global culture and ideas. So when we say conduit, means a channel of conveying something. So media is a channel of conveying some information around the globe. So globalization relies on media. So Jack Lul was then right to ask, could global trade have evolved without a flow of information on markets, prices, commodities, and more? Could empires have stretched across the world without communication throughout their borders? Could religion, music, poetry, film, cuisine, and fashion develop as they have without the intermingling of media and culture? So, we will answer these following questions after our journey in learning about media and globalization. So, I am done discussing a brief discussion about our topic for today. So, let's proceed for our first topic, which is about media and its function, that will be discussed by Miss Julian Cherry Clapano.
Good day, everyone. I am Julian Cherry Clapano, the second reporter of Group F. So the topic that I'm going to discuss is media and its function. So what is media and its function? Media and its function, Lul defines media as a means of conveying anything, such as a route of communication. So a person's voice is technically a medium when critics use the term media, plural of medium, and they are referring to the technologies of mass communication, and magazines and newspapers are example of media. The radio and televisions are both example of broadcast media. And finally, digital media includes the internet as well as mobile communication. Email, internet sites such as social media, and internet-based video and audio are examples of internet media. While defining the term of media is relatively simple, and determining what media do and how they affect societies is more challenging. So Marshall McLuhan, a media theorist, once said that the medium is the message, but he didn't mean that message are meaningless and have no effect on people. Rather, his statement was intended to bring attention to the fact that media as a type of technology has the ability to transform society. So the next slide is, as a result, the function of media is just like television, is more than just a message carrier. It is also influences the viewers, social conduct, and reorients the family behavior. So sugod niabot ang television, it lets people take away from dining room where they dine and tell stories to one another. Kay siguro, for example, kung wala pa ang television, we or our family is sabay mi mag-eat siguro og breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We make bonds like we're sharing some of our story life. Nagachika-chika mi unsay nahitabo sa among whole day life, some toward the living room habang nagkakaon mi with the family. But now they strictly munch on their food while watching primetime shows, since its introduction in the 1960s television has also isolated people from other people, preventing them from engaging in activities such as playing video games or reading books. And today's in our generation, smartphones allows user to communicate with several individuals at the same time in real time. We can communicate to other people bisan naa siya sa layo or naaba siya sa lain bansa. Through media, pwede ta maka-learn, just like now we're gaining knowledge through online class. Maka-inform ta and ma-inform ta kung unsay balita through social media, but there are some of fake news na ma-receive ang mga tao na makasira pod sa society. Pwede ra ta makakitag uyab through online, and that's how media function our society for today. And considering the impact of the internet on interpersonal connection, prior the cell phone, there was no way for couples to stay in constant contact or keep up with what the other was up to. This social shift is made possible by technology, which is medium, not by the message. So, various media are simultaneously extending and amputating human senses, according to McLuhan. New media may extend communication reach but also impair users' communicative abilities. Consider writing medium, as stories was mostly done orally before people wrote down on parchment. Storytellers needed to have retentive memories in order to transform stories verbally from one person to the next after the 4th century BCE. However, papyrus became more prevalent in Egypt, allowing more people to record their memories. As a result, storytellers didn't have to rely solely in their collections to deliver their stories. Some philosophers at the time claimed that this development harmed people's memory. So in the last slide, something similar can be said about cell phones. On the one hand, they expand people's senses because they provide the capability to talk more people instantaneously and simultaneously. On the other hand, they also limit the senses because they make user easily distractible and more multitasking. This is not necessarily a bad thing. It is merely change with a trade-off. So cell phones are comfortable in this regard. On the one hand, they broaden people's horizons by allowing them to communicate with more individuals at the same time. On the other side, they limit the senses by making users more easily distracted and prone multitasking. This isn't inherently a bad thing, but it is just a shift that comes with a cost. And that's all. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you for that very informative report, Miss Julian Cherry Clapano. And now it's me again, Benikumisi Uganap. Will be discussed about the next topic, which is entitled The Global Village and Cultural Imperialism. So, the Global Village and Cultural Imperialism. So, McLuhan used his analysis of technology to examine the impact of electronic media. So, who is McLuhan? Herbert Marshall McLuhan is a Canadian communications theorist and literature professor, held by many as a prophet for the 20th century. So since he was writing around the 1960s, he mainly analyzed the social changes brought about the television. So McLuhan declared that television was turning the world into a global village. So what do we mean by a global village? So global village describes the phenomenon of the entire world becoming more interconnected as the result of propagation of the media technologies throughout the world. So the term global village means all parts of the world as they are being brought together by the internet and other electronic communications interconnections. So that's it. McLuhan meant that as more and more people sat down in front of their television sets and listened to all the same stories, their perception of the world would contract. If tribal villages once sat in front of fires to listen to collective stories, the members of the new global village would sit in front of the bright boxes in their living rooms. So that's the definition of McLuhan in the global village. So in the years after McLuhan, media scholars further grappled with the challenges of global media culture. So a lot of these early thinkers assumed that global media had a tendency to homogenize culture. So they argued that as a global media spread, people from all over the world would begin to watch, listen, and read the same things. So, let me explain about localizing the maturity. So, if cultural organization merely entails the spread of a Western monoculture, what explains the prevalence of regional cultural trends? So, for example, the regionalization of culture was a boon to Filipino telenovelas. Okay, from 2000 to 2002. ABS-CBN aired Pangako Sa'yo starring Jericho Rosales and Christine Hermosa. So this is not the new Pangako Sa'yo, which is starred by Daniel and Catherine Bernardo. So it is from 2000 to 2002, which is starred by Jericho Rosales and Christine Hermosa. So this is the old Pangako Sa'yo version. So the show soon became a hit in Singapore and Malaysia, and its two stars become household names. So in 2003, Cambodia TV purchased the rights to produce its own version of the show. So Cambodia have their own version of Pangako Sa'yo. So until now, Filipino telenovelas like Be Careful with My Heart find audiences across the Southeast Asia. So that's one of the example. Now, even though Pangako Sa'yo is a Filipino movie, no, it is also known in different part of the world, such as Singapore and Malaysia. So they have this dub, no, ginadub nila ang Filipino language from their language para masabtan sa citizens of Singapore and Malaysia. So they really love Filipino movie Pangako Sa'yo. Until now, no, Filipino telenovelas. Another example is Be Careful with My Heart. So they have find audiences across the Southeast Asia, and it make us Filipino proud. So they argue that as a global media spread, people from all over the world begin to watch, listen to, and read the same things. So this thinking arose at a time when America's power had turned into the world's cultural heavyweight. So commentators therefore believe that media globalization coupled with American hegemony would create a form of cultural imperialism whereby American values and culture would overwhelm all others. So what do we mean by cultural imperialism? So cultural imperialism is the domination of one culture over one another. So cultural imperialism can take the form of a general attitude or an active, formal, and deliberate policy including or resulting from military action. So economic or technological factors may also play a role. So that is cultural imperialism. So one of example of the promotion of cultural imperialism is the promotion of American culture through the Hollywood movies. It is seen as form of cultural imperialism. So again, cultural imperialism is the domination of one culture over one another. So example though is the promotion of American culture through the Hollywood movies. Okay, and I truly believe in that. Let me cite some examples. Me as a Filipino, there's a lot of Filipino who fun to watch Netflix. So in the Netflix, there's a lot of random movies, foreign movies. So of course, different culture there is presented. So some Filipino Netflix watchers, they really love to what do you call this, imitate their favorite character, the way they wear their clothes, and even fluency of saying English or talking English. They tend to imitate their favorite character in terms of the clothing, the way they walk, and even they talk. So that's it. That is an example of cultural imperialism. So in 1976, media critic Herbert Schuller argued that not only was the world being Americanized, but this process also led to spread of American capitalist values like consumerism. So similarly, for John Tomlinson, cultural globalization is simply a euphemism for Western cultural imperialism. So since it promotes homogenized, westernized consumer culture. So these scholars decry cultural imperialism, however, have a top-down view of the media. So since they are more concerned with the broad structures that determines media content, media content. So moreover, their focus on America has led them to neglect other global flows of information that media can enable. So this media or cultural imperialism theory has therefore been subject to significant critique. So that's it. This is the issue about cultural imperialism. So later on, I will ask a question: is cultural imperialism possible? So, thank you for listening about my discussion. So let's proceed to the next topic.
Good day everyone, my name is Beatrice Bacolod and we will be talking about the critics of cultural imperialism. In the 1980s, media scholars began to pay attention to the ways in which audiences understood and interpret media messages. The field of audiences studies emphasizes the media consumers or active participants in meaning-making process who view media text. In media studies, a text simply refers to the content of any medium through their own cultural lenses. And so, ang mga scholars kaya nagbigay pansin man saon pagsabot sa mga tao sa message na gina-convey sa media. So, ang the best example analyze ka ng mga products na gina-endorse nila, like for example, fast food chain na pwede sa tanan. Distinguished Professor Ian Ange is a professor of cultural studies and was the founding director of Institutes of Culture and Society. She is one of the leaders of cultural studies worldwide, with interdisciplinary was spanning many areas of humanities and social sciences. Professor Ange innovates interdisciplinary work deals broadly with patterns of cultural flows in exchange and globalized world, focusing on issues such as the formation of audiences and publics, the politics of identity and difference, migration intensity and multiculturalism in Asia and Australia, issues of representation and contemporary cultural institutions. In 1985, Indonesian critic Ian Ange studied the way in which different viewers in the Netherlands experience watching the American soap opera Dahlias. Through letter from 42 viewers, she presented a detailed analysis of audience viewing experience. Rather than simply receiving the American culture in a passive and resigned way, she noted the viewers put a lot of emotional energy into the process and they experienced pleasure based on how the program resonated with them. Ange posted a question: I like watching the TV series Dahlias but get odd reaction to it. Would anyone like to write or to tell me why you like it or dislike it? I should like to assimilate these reactions into my university thesis. So she received 42 replies, 3 male and 39 female. This would lead to a supposition that the majority of the viewers are female. However, the question was posed in a woman magazine and it was less accessible to men. She also indicated that these letters should be read systematically. In 1990, Iloho Katz and Tamar Leeds decided to push Ange analysis further by examining how viewers from distinct cultural communities interpret Dahlias. And so these scholars have conducted research into cultural differences in the interpretation of American television drama, most notably the U.S. primetime melodramatic soap opera Dahlias, which was broadcast in many countries. They argue that texts are received differently by varied interpretative communities because they derive different meanings and pleasure from these texts. They were difference of emphasis among the various groups. So the Arabs daw is they're also participants are mainly referred to kinship rules and norms. For the other groups, there was a second most frequent topic. The moral dilemmas were the concern of both kibbutz and Arab groups, while other Americans made frequent reference to business relations. Apart from the challenge of audience studies, the cultural imperialism thesis have been belied by the renewed strength of regional trends in the globalization process. Asian culture, for example, has proliferated worldwide through the globalization of media. Like Japanese brand from Hello Kitty to Mario Brothers to Pokemons are now indelible part of our global popular culture. And as you can see, these Japanese brand such as Hello Kitty to Super Mario to Pokemon is hindi siya ma-erase sa ato ang pandaigdigang kultura or hindi siya ma-erase sa ato mismo. The same tab said for Korean pop or K-pop and Korean telenovelas which are widely successful regionally and globally. And so media is dako makanig-impact sa ato and K-pop and Korean telenovelas is nag-spread regionally and globally. It changed people's perception, especially like gina-admire nila, no? So like mausab yun ang ato ang dawita unsa tamtanaw, especially sa ilaha. The observation even applied to culinary taste. The most obvious case of globalized Asian cuisine is sushi. So today's sushi is most often associated with Japanese culture, though the many variation of sushis can actually be traced to numerous countries and culture including Japanese, Korean, and Chinese. And while is it true that McDonald's has continued to spread across Asia, there's also case the Asian brands have provided stiff competition. And as you notice, no, McDonald's kay isa po siya sa mga pagkaoran na bisan asa ka mo to is na siya nagakalat and nagakalat siya across the Asia. And kanang McDonald's key is to focus their customer satisfaction. McDonald's operation competitive strategy focus on the cost, speed, and nutrition. They prioritize making the customer happy. The Philippines Jollibee claims to be the #1 choice for fast food and Brunei. So, ano very popular ang Jollibee sa Brunei? So, it is because the recognition of Jollibee's chicken joy as the best fried chicken and Brunei is a statement of Jollibee's mainstream presence in the food culture of Brunei, as well as the global reach and influences the one of the Philippine top conglomerates, Ambassador Montero. And so, given this pattern, it is no longer tenable to insist that globalization is unidirectional process, foreign cultures overwhelming local ones. And sama sa gingon sa Aralin 1, is dili adyo siya magpantay-pantay, no? Pero it leaves room para sa dynamism and cultural change.
Social media and the creation of cyber ghettos. Media. We'll describe media as a means of conveying something such as channel of communication. Social media, websites and applications that enable users to create and share content or to participate in social networking. Cyber ghettos, it is a location on the cyberspace or ghettos where a group of community is disregarded. As with all new media, have both beneficial and negative effects. On the hand of these forms of communication have democratized access. Anyone with an internet connection or a smartphone can ask Facebook and Twitter for free. These media have enabled users to be consumers and producers of information simultaneously. At this point, only a few media scholars argue that the world is becoming culturally homogeneous. Sense of pride in one's cultures, nationality, and common background with fellow citizens. Internet and social media are proving that the globalization of culture and ideas can move in different directions. While Western cultures remain powerful and media production is still controlled by powerful Western corporations, the Internet, particularly social media, is challenging previous ideas about media and globalization. These movements were largely enabled by social media. Digital citizens can be easily coerced by numerous demands or petitions coming from the people of manipulative intent. The democratic potential of social media was most evident in 2011 during the wave of uprisings known as the Arab Spring. Without access to traditional broadcast media like TV, activities opposing authoritarian regime in Tunisia, Egypt, and Libya used Twitter to organize and disseminate information. Their efforts stopped their respective governments. More recently, the Women's March against newly installed U.S. President Donald Trump began with a tweet from a Hawaii lawyer and became a national, even global movement. Ito yung picture noong the massive protest of the Arab Spring were largely enabled by social media. Commentators began referring to the emergence of what is known as splinternet, which means a pun coined to describe the internet as it exists in each separate nation providing its own separate version for users of each country. While the cyber balkanization describes the process by which the censorship and the application of filters on internet contents causes fragmentation or subdivision within. Example of this is in the United States. Voters of Democratic Party largely read liberal websites and voters of the Republican Party largely read conservative websites. This segmentation has been exacerbated by the nature of social media feeds, leading users to read articles, memes, and the videos shared by like-minded friends. As such, being on Facebook can resemble living in an echo chamber, which reinforces one's existing beliefs and opinions, eventually making users more partisan and closed-minded.
Hi everyone, good day. I am Carla A. Pitogo and I will be reporting the continuation of Miss Gladys Donaire's report, which is all about social media and the creation of cyber ghettos. So first, who is Vladimir Putin? So, Russian dictator Vladimir Putin, he was born on the 7th of October, year 1952. He is a Russian politician and former intelligence officer who is serving as the current president of Russia since 2012. Previously, being in the office from 1999 until 2008. He was also a prime minister from 1999 to 2000 and again from 2008 to 2012. As of 2021, Putin is the second largest serving European president after Alexander Lukashenko of Belarus. So, si Vladimir Putin, she is the second largest serving European president. Russian dictator Vladimir Putin has hired armies of social media trolls, paid users who harass political opponents, to manipulate public opinion through intimidation and the spreading of fake news. Most recently, American intelligence agencies established that Putin used trolls and online misinformation to help Donald Trump win the presidency, a tactic the Russian autocrat is likely to repeat in European election he seeks to influence. So, kani si Vladimir Putin, kay gahire ni siya og kanang armies daw nga ginatawag og trolls. So, kana siya ginatawag og trolls kay paid users na siya nga gaharas og political opponents, kanang naga-spread sila fake news, unya spread sila fake news to manipulate people. So kung diriya pa lang sa atoa is ang atoa ng term ana is kung gav kana ganing mag-vote ta kay kanang mura nag ilang ginadula ang ato ang voting kay ilahan naman gina-manipulate murag ilanang ga-vote buying na sila gina-manipulate nila ang usa ang usa ka tawo para lang makadaog ang kanang tawo nga nidagan as a president or vice or something ana unya, which is not good kay kabalo beta nga kanang everyone has the right to vote, and kanang it is the ang kanang voting is mo na siya ang kanang way nga madungog ang atong tingog sa kadaghanan sa unsa may mga problems ana unsa may mga kuan ato sa atong country or sa atong specific place ana. In places across the world, Putin imitators replicate his strategy on online trolling and disinformation to clamp down on dissent and delegitimize critical media. Critics of the increasingly dictatorial regime of Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan are threatened by online mobs of pro-government trolls who hack accounts and threaten violence. Some of the responses have included threats of sexual violence against women. So, sa kanang mga lugar across the world, so kaning si Putin naa siya kanang mga imitators, kaning mga tawo nga ginasundog ang iyang mga lihok, gisundog ang iyang mga lihok para makadaog ang usa ka tawo sa kana nga position. So ginasundog nila tong mga disinformation, mga spreading of fake news, spreading of fake news sa kanang mga inana niya sa anya. There's some point nga kanang sa spread nila ginana kay kanang kung dili gani nimo butaran nga kana nga person kay mag-on siya, mag-reflect siya or ginatreat nila ang mga tawo o kanang mga sexual violence, kanang murag ila nang i-blackmail anak gani nga mga lihok anak, which is not good. As the preceding cases show, fake information can spread easily on social media since they have few content filters. Unlike newspapers, Facebook does not have a team of editors who are trained to sift through and filter information. If a news article, even a fake one, gets a lot of shares, it will reach many people with Facebook accounts. So, kita biya as a person kanang most especially karon na generations is more on social media, kanang murag ang ato ng paminaw is galihok na ang atong tanan sa social media, kanang gaposta diri dito din ana unya, kanang dili na nato ma-determine ba nga kanang information whether it is true or fake, kay kabalo na ta nga dali ra ta maatik ana nga makuan labaw na og kanang daghag shares unya daghag likes ana motuo dayon ta ana nang kaapan sa tuwa unya. Kanang ang example ani is kato ganing daghan kayog shares ang katong opening daw sa Facebook opening sa Christmas tree lightning sa Tagum, kay gina-share nila is November 2025, pero ang exactly jud ana siya nga kanang exactly jud nga mag-open ang Christmas lights sa Tagum is December 1. So mo to siya kanang dili kay daghan kayo og reacts, daghan kayo shares, motuo na dayon ana. This dark side of social media shows that even a seemingly open and democratic media may be corrupted towards undemocratic means. Global online propaganda will be the biggest threat to face as the globalization of media deepens. Internet media have made the world so interconnected that a Russia dictator can, for example, influence American election on the chip. So, kanang on social media, kay kanang whatever nga imuhang gina-share sa group of people or whatever, or if ever it is so realistic or understandable, nagyapoy possibilities nga makorrupt siya. When I say makorrupt, kanang bisan pag realistic to siya, mahimo siyang fake news or kanang gina-add nila og mga uncertain words, kanang dili mga kanang dili gani tinuod nga mga words anak ba. So kana siya nga mga traits, kana siya nga mga buhat, kay mao na siya ang pinakadako nga threats karon sa atong globalization. Kay kanang kuan ba, kanang ihang kanang sa mga gagmay nga butang, kay naay mga ways nga mas mudako siya, pero mudako siya nga kanang lain na ang information sa katong nga formation, lahi na nga formation sa katong nga information. Murag kanang iha na siyang lahion, maabot na siya sa ang realistic kay mahimo na og fake news anak gani. Kana yang example ato katong kanang influence American election on the chip. So by through social media, kay kanang gahatag na sila og kanang mga information, anang mga kuan nga kanang murag ila nang dauton through online ang kanang voting, ana ila nang himuon og kanang dula-dula ang voting, dili na realistic ang voting, ana nya mura nag ilang i-vote buying, ana nya, which is not good jud kaayo. I mean, which is not good, ana. Of media, users must remain vigilant and learn how to distinguish fact from falsehood in a global media landscape that allows politicians to peddle what President Trump's senior advisor now call alternative facts. Though people must remain critical of mainstream media and traditional journalism that may also operate based on vested interests, we must also insist that some sources are more credible than others. So, sa karon nga panahon, kailangan na dyan nato ma-determine kung ang information or kana siya nga situation is kanang realistic ba or fake news. So kung gusto ka kung by that, kay kanang para ma-determine mo kung realistic ba siya, kanang tinuod ba siyang information, we should search for more, kanang mas mangutana pa ta, mas mag-search pa ta sa kanang nga situation para makabalo jud ta kung unsay tinuod. So kanang nya dili pud ta dapat magtuo-tuo dayon. So kailangan jud tag further information pa jud para kanang mas realistic, para mas matuo jud ta, kay labaw na sa karong panahon nga daghan kayo og kanang mga fake news, ana we should be vigilant, kanang aware kanita. Most importantly, kanang dili jud dapat ta mag-attain og kanang mga situations or kanang mga informations nga mga kanang magbuhat ta og kanang mga information which is fake news, ana dili jud ta magbuhat og mga inana. Kay if kanang small things matters, bisan pa man og kanang kamay lang na imong gibuhat nga mga ingana nga mga butang, so magmatter jud na siya guys, na jud na siya effect, whether ang effect ana sa iya is sa imo or sa lain or sa ato ang country, basta na jud na siya effect guys. As in nya pakonsensyahon ta mo nga dili jud na siya nga maayo nga buhat, as in promise. And that will be all. Thank you for listening.